Hey guys, Frank Spear. Welcome back to another episode of what I'm going to call Watch This. There are a lot of folks who purport, claim, believe, teach that 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 17 are depicting what was in the first century, 70 AD, a literal catching up of saints from off of planet Earth into an invisible realm, off in the heavens somewhere, to be with God. I aim to show today that what I consider to be the meaning of that passage, referring back to the receiving of the law in the time of Moses, and we're going to look at a mess of similar language, and I'm going to try to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that 1 Thessalonians 4:17 specifically is the motif of Exodus 19:23, chapters 19, chapter 23, and so forth. Now, I admit that I can't put every piece of the puzzle together back in Exodus, because I think it is depicting the time that Christ came to Judah, his ministry, his death, his, we'll call it his ascension, his glorification, and his return. All of that, I think, is depicted in this Exodus motif back in the book of Exodus. I think Jesus was leading a second Exodus. I think Jesus was a second Moses. I think Jesus was, or let me put it this way. I think Jesus was typified in Moses. I think Jesus was typified in Joseph. I think Jesus was typified in Abraham. I think Jesus was typified in Adam. I think Jesus was typified in Joshua. I think Jesus was typified in David. All of these Old Testament characters, if you will, are forerunners, in some way a picture of what Jesus, Messiah of Israel, would come to do. He fulfilled all that was written in the law and the prophets. And so as Moses led the children of Israel out of bondage, slavery in Egypt under wicked Pharaoh, Jesus came to lead true Israelites, faithful Israelites out from bondage to Judaism. That is why in the book of Revelation, Jerusalem is depicted, called Egypt. There's so much to say here. I think that the motif of Moses going up to God in the mountain to receive the law, to receive instructions on how to build the tabernacle, all of that is a picture of Jesus and the work that he did. So let's just jump right in, because there's a lot to cover, okay? This is going to be a fairly long video, but I think it's going to be the most interesting teaching I've done so far in these recent videos I've been making. So let's jump right in. Now, before we do that, let me say this. There are a lot of people mocking, I mean literally name-calling, personally insulting those who don't believe in the literal rapture. They make videos and they laugh and they jeer and they scoff and they put pictures of us up, our faces on their videos, and poke fun the whole time, saying how stupid we are if you are in the group that holds this view that I'm going to espouse today, and just saying how ridiculous this view is. And I'm hoping to show today that it's not so ridiculous. Okay, let's start in Exodus chapter 19, verse 1. In the third month, all these threes pop up, right? We're going to see that. In the third month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. Now, this is the mountain where the presence of God dwells. God comes down on this mountain repeatedly, and he meets Moses and he meets others up in this mountain. So they have to go up to this mountain regularly to get to God, to his presence, to where he is. And he comes down from heaven to that mountain and meets them there. Okay? Now, there are a lot of parallels to the life of Jesus here, and I cannot place them all, in the exact timeline of how Jesus fulfilled each one. It gets kind of jumbly, but I'll let you do that work. But what I will demonstrate is that it's here. Okay? Verse 3, Moses went up to God. So here it says, look, in the wilderness there, the Israelites camped in front of the mountain. And then Moses goes up to God in that mountain. The Israelites cannot go up. Now, the book of Hebrews says that the first century saints had already come up to the mountain of the New Jerusalem, but had not yet ascended that new mountain. And he talks about the fact, remember, Jerusalem was set on a mountain, was set on a hill, a city set on a hill. That's where their temple was. That's where the presence of God was for them in the first century. We come to the New Testament, also through the Old Testament as well, but I want to kind of draw these parallels from the Old to the New. When you went up to Jerusalem to worship God, you went up there to meet God. You went up to meet him in the heavens, which was the temple. Here it would be the tabernacle, but before it was the tabernacle, they met God in the mountain. Think about Jacob's dream, where he fell asleep and he had a dream of the angels of God ascending and descending on a ladder in that spot. So he built an altar there and he sacrificed on that altar, built a pillar there, right? The temple in the New Jerusalem is built on these stones, this pillar. So it's all the same. Before they had the tabernacle, they had pillars and altars where they sacrificed and they met God. Right? So you've got the angels, the priests, going up and down on the ladder of God. This is the place where God's presence was, right? So eventually, that spot where Jacob had the dream would be the spot where the temple was built, that very spot. And Joseph had a dream about the future, that this would be the place that the priests would go up to the temple, they would come down, they would bring the sacrifices, and the angels, the messengers, the workers of God. And I'll show that in a few minutes here, how angels are the workers of God, that they're humans. Maybe not every time, I'm still working on that, but very often. And Jacob had a dream that this would be the spot. And it was the spot for many, many, many years. Right? Where that temple was built. And so when they went up to Jerusalem, they went up on the mountain, because the presence of God was in the Holy of Holies, that most holy place behind that curtain. And the floor had to be blue because it represented heaven and so forth. And a lot of those things, the materials, the curtains and so forth in the tabernacle and the pieces of furniture, etc., represented God in the heavens above humanity, somewhere away from them and above them and higher than them in the place of rule and authority. That's why God meets them on a mountaintop. They're always going up. This ladder that Jacob had a dream. The angels are going up and down and up and down. The work of the priests. Okay? So watch this. They camped in front of the mountain, and Moses went up to the mountain. He went up to God. It says God is up in the mountain. And the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob," the people of Israel, "and you shall tell this to the sons of Israel." Jacob had that dream. These are the children of Jacob, right? "You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. I took you out of the land of Egypt." Verse 5, Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, my contract, okay, my agreement, then you shall be my own possession, my own special treasure. That's the literal meaning of the Hebrew. You will be my own special treasure, watch this, from among the peoples of all the land. So it wasn't that God despised all the other peoples or had no dealings with them or couldn't care less about them. He says, but I will lift you, the children of Jacob, out from among those peoples to be a special people to me, a special treasure, right? Not his only treasure, but a special treasure. Watch this. "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests." go-betweens, mediators to the other people. That's why foreigners could join themselves to Israel. You will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, a set-apart nation. These are the words that you shall speak, Moses, to the sons of Israel. So Moses was on the mountain and he received that word from God. So Moses came, he came down from the mountain and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded him. So that's like Jesus coming down from heaven, right? To the first century Jews in the Gospels. So Moses came and he called the elders of the people and he set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded them. Didn't Jesus go? Didn't he speak to the leaders of the people? Then he called together his own elders, if you will, his disciples. But he spoke to them all and told them what the Lord commanded. All the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. So he goes back and tells them what they said. And Jesus quite often prayed. So who knows what he was praying to the Father there. But here's a point. Remember in John 6:68, Jesus says to his disciples, as people were walking away from his teaching, they didn't like what he was saying, and so they were abandoning him, right? He goes around like a rabbi, he's teaching. And people, after he said certain things, they said, this is not for us. And they walked away. But the disciples say, who else are we going to go to? You alone have the words of eternal life. We're going to stick with you. Right? Just like here in verse 7. So Moses came and called the elders of the people and told them what God had said. And they said, everything that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Verse 9. So this parallels the ministry of Jesus. That's what I'm trying to show. So the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud. Here's that cloud language again. God appears in the mountain, up in the heavens, if you will, in a cloud. That's where you have to go to see him, to meet him. You meet him there, in the air, up high. The people looked up and watched Moses go up. Acts chapter 1. They watched Jesus go into the heavens. Where were they? They were on the Mount of Olives. Jesus was teaching them there on the Mount of Olives. And then he left. Is it possible that he went up to the temple? You go down the Mount of Olives and you ascend the Temple Mount up into the heavens, where the presence of God was, the Shekinah glory cloud. The Shekinah glory cloud enveloped all of them when in the Mount of Transfiguration, the mountain of Transfiguration. It's everywhere, folks. Up to the heavens is up on the mountain. The cloud is the Shekinah glory of God, the presence of God that led them out of Egypt. They followed the cloud. They followed God's presence. Verse 9, the Lord said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud so that the people may hear when I speak with you and may also believe in you, right, forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. They said they agree with the wedding contract. They say, I do. Right? So God offers them a contract, a marriage, and the people, the bride, say, I do. And so Moses goes back to the Father up in the mountain, in the cloud, and tells him the people, the bride, the virgin, she says she'll marry you. Verse 10. The Lord also said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. They would see the cloud, and he would speak from the cloud. Don't we see that in the New Testament? This is my beloved Son, hear him. On the Mount of Transfiguration, out from the Shekinah cloud, up on the mountain, in the heavenly places, up in the air. That's where God spoke to his people. That's where he gave them the law. That's where he gave them the covenant. That's where he gave them the wedding contract. It happened here in the Old Testament. It would happen again in the New, with the new covenant that God was making with the people. So much to say here. And the Lord said to Moses, right? Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow and let them wash their garments. Weren't they getting ready for the wedding all through the New Testament? Were they being baptized, being washed, preparing for to put on the white garments that we see in the book of Revelation? Wasn't Jesus dressed all in white, shining white in the Mount of Transfiguration? This is all symbolic right here for them becoming clean, for them putting on the clothes of the bride, getting ready for the wedding, washed, getting dressed. Revelation 21, I saw a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, a new mountain, a new temple mount, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. Same thing. This is a marriage. That was a new marriage. Okay. And let them be ready for the third day. Well, what happened on the third day with Jesus? We all know that. The third day is what started it all. The third day is, in many ways, the real inception of the new covenant that was coming in. It was the beginning of the marriage. Jesus died in Adam as an old covenant Israelite and was resurrected in the new body, right? Representing the new body that would come. Not the body of Moses, not the old covenant Israelites, not the body of Adam, dead in law, but the resurrected Jesus, a new man, no longer under the old covenant. So he was the first fruits from among many brethren. And so Jesus kicked it off, if you will, with the resurrection. And that's what's happening here. On the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Jesus appeared to them after his resurrection. And he spent 40 days with them, right? We'll see 40 coming up. And then he went away for 40 years. And then he returned and gave them the new law, if you will. Gave them the new Jerusalem, gave them the new tabernacle. I will come down on Mount Sinai in sight of all the people. Verse 12, watch this. You shall set bounds for the people all around the mountain, and saying, beware that you do not go up on the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Genesis chapter 3, don't eat from the tree or touch it, or you shall surely be put to death. Right? Genesis, and I've talked about this death a lot in my 4 resurrection videos. Watch this. You shall set bounds for the people. Put boundaries around this mountain, the presence of God, and they can't come near it. They can't touch it. This sounds like the tree of life, too. After Adam's kicked out of the garden, they can't come back. They can't touch it. They've got angels guarding it. So again, I can't put together every piece and exactly how it all lines up. I'm just showing you that the motifs that are here in the old covenant are there in the new. You shall set bounds for the people all around the mountain, saying, beware, do not go up to the mountain. They couldn't go up yet. But in 1 Thessalonians 4, they went up. It was a different covenant. Under this covenant of death, you could not go up. You couldn't even touch the mountain. The writer of Hebrews addresses this very thing. He said under the old covenant, they couldn't go to the mountain. They couldn't touch the mountain. They could only come up to it, but they couldn't touch it. In this new mountain, it's going to be different. We get to go up this time into the very presence of God. Paul said, we see now in a mirror darkly, but then we'll see face to face. Something was coming they were waiting for. Something new. A new Jerusalem. Watch this. Verse 13, no hand shall touch. If somebody comes up to the mountain, then they needed to be put to death if they touched it. But no hand shall touch him, but he shall be stoned or shot through with a bow and arrow. Watch this. Whether beast or man, he will not live if he touches the mountain. Watch this. Now, I think beasts there are talking about foreigners that were with the Israelites. And I'm going to prove that in a couple of minutes. This is not, do you think God was really concerned if an animal bumped into the mountain that he would have it killed? Somehow that offended God? A literal animal? No. These are foreigners that left Egypt with the Israelites that were with them, and they were receiving the covenant also. They were receiving the covenant. They were going to be part of the bride, just like in the new covenant system. I'm going to prove that. So neither man, Adam, that's the word, Adam, right? The Israelites, That's who was being created in the garden. They eventually came to be called the Israelites. Jesus' genealogy traces back to Adam. So neither an Adamite or a beast of the field, either one of them, they can't touch the mountain. Watch this. When the ram's horn sounds the trumpet, and along with the long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. At that point, they can come up to the mountain. They couldn't come up to the mountain before that, but when they hear the trumpet blast, then they can come up to the mountain. Folks, that's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Then they could come to the place of God's presence. So Moses went, and so could the beasts of the field come to God's presence at the blast. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. That's like the ministry of Jesus, right? He came down from the presence of God. He preached the gospel. The people were getting clean, baptized, preparing themselves for the wedding. And the third day, they'd get to go up. The third day is resurrection. That's when it all began. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people, consecrated the people. They washed their garments. He said to the people, be ready for the third day. And don't go near a woman. Okay? That one, I'm sure there's a meaning to that. So they were keeping themselves pure. Right? So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunder and lightning and flashes and a thick cloud upon the mountain and a very loud trumpet sound. And so all the people in the camp were trembling, and Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God at the mountain. To meet God at the mountain. 1 Thessalonians 4:17, they would meet the Lord in the air, or in the heavens, or in the new Jerusalem that was on the new Temple Mount, not made with human hands. That's what it's talking about. Not them floating off literally into an invisible realm. That is this. They're meeting God in the new covenant system, just like Moses was giving them the first covenant system. This was the old wedding. That's the new wedding. They were the bride, now meeting God in the new house, which came down out of heaven. God came down out of heaven to the mountain, and they met him in the mountain. The new Jerusalem comes down out of heaven from God on the new mount, on the new Temple Mount, on the new Mount Moriah. And they went up to meet him in that place that came down. It's the same thing. All 1 Thessalonians 4:17 is saying that the old covenant had passed. And when that happened in AD 70, and this Exodus thing passed away, that marriage of God to national ethnic Israel under this old covenant system, when that marriage was not annulled, but when that divorce went through and was finalized in AD 70, the new marriage took place, and they went up to the Father's house. That's where the bride in Israelite weddings went on the wedding. That's where the husband, the groom, went on the wedding day to the bride's father's house to get the bride and then bring her back to his father's house. So it's all there typified. They didn't go up to an invisible realm. They weren't literally sucked up off planet Earth. What was happening in Exodus happened in the new Exodus. They went up to the new place where the presence of God was. John 14, what did Jesus say? I go to prepare a place for you. We're going to see in a couple minutes that's exactly what Moses went to do when he goes up on the mountain again in chapter 23. He goes to prepare a place for them, a Father's house, so that Israelites could meet God in the place of his presence, the tabernacle. Moses goes up on the mountain to receive instructions for how to build the tabernacle, the place of God's presence on earth. What does Revelation 21 say? Behold, a new tabernacle. A new Jerusalem came down out of heaven, right? And God tabernacled among men, just like he did here in the Shekinah glory cloud that was over the tabernacle. That's why there's cloud language in 1 Thessalonians 4:4. They're meeting the Lord in the Shekinah glory cloud, in the new tabernacle. That's just saying his presence is now somewhere other than where it was in the literal temple in Jerusalem. God, I hope this is making sense to you guys. All right, let's go on. And Moses, verse 17, Exodus 19, Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet the Father, to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. So they're brought to the mountain, just like 1 Thessalonians 4. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, smoke, cloud, and its smoke ascended into the smoke, ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. Well, that happens at the crucifixion. There's an earthquake. People are raised from the dead at the time Jesus dies, and they go into Jerusalem. There's an earthquake. There's earthquakes through the book of Revelation when the old system was destroyed and the new one was given. And when the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke and God answered him with thunder. So we've got it all here. We've got the clouds. We've got the earthquake. We've got the trumpets. We've got the mountain and them going up to meet the Lord in the air, in the clouds, in the heavenly place. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke and God answered him with thunder, and the Lord came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. And the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. This is like Acts chapter 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses and said, go down and warn the people so that they do not break through to the Lord and gaze, and many of them perish. They weren't at this time under the old covenant allowed to go where Moses could go into that presence. That's why Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you. I can go there, but where I'm going, you cannot come yet. Moses could go into the glory cloud, into the presence, but they could only come up to the mountain. In 1 Thessalonians 4, they could go up, all the way up, into the new Father's house, into the new Jerusalem, up to the new Temple Mount, into the new Holy of Holies, into the glory cloud of Shekinah, into the presence of God. Because that new presence had come down to be among them, the new tabernacle. When the sound, remember, only the priest could go in once a year to the holy place. Now in the New Jerusalem, everyone could go into the presence of God. It was a different system, a brand new one. And the beasts of the field were allowed in too. Just like here, foreigners could become part of the house of Israel. This is fascinating stuff. All right, let's continue on here. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke. Then the Lord came down on Mount Sinai, the top of the mountain. The Lord called to Moses on top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Jesus went up in Acts chapter 1, right? I mean, am I right? Did he go up? Was there a cloud? Were they by mountains? Yes. They were by mountains. There was the Mount of Olives and there was the Temple Mount. And the disciples watched him go up into the Shekinah cloud. Wasn't God's presence depicted in the temple at Jerusalem? Is it possible that Jesus somehow in that language went up, like 1 Thessalonians 4 in that language? Like the cloud language of AD 70 in the presence of God in that language? Isn't it possible that Jesus went down from the Mount of Olives and up to the Temple Mount? Am I saying that Jesus never entered heaven, literally that unseen realm with the Father? I'm not saying that. But I'm saying let's look at Acts chapter 1 in the way that we're looking at this. It's the same language. Let's not dissect that, or let's not extract that from this language. Jesus was, in effect, bringing about a second Exodus. And he was receiving a new covenant and giving it to the people. And he was getting it on the mountain. And the people would come up to the mountain. This language of mountains and clouds cannot just be accidental with Jesus or not referring back to this. It's impossible. Of course it is. These are the parallels. Jesus was doing what Moses did in the same ways. All right, let's go. Verse 20, the Lord came down on the mountain, on top of the mountain, and the Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, go down again and warn the people so that they not break through and gaze, right, and look at this glory cloud, or they will perish. Also the priests who came near to the Lord to consecrate themselves, they can't look either, or else the Lord will break out against them. And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to the mountain of Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds around the mountain and consecrate it. So Moses says, you said the people can't come all where I'm going. You told us to keep them away from that. Then the Lord said to him, go down and come up again. Right? This is Jesus going down, coming back up again. Then he goes down again. Then the Lord said to him, go down and come up again, you and Aaron with you this time, but do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4 hadn't come yet. The time hadn't come yet. It didn't come till the new covenant where they could actually come up. So Moses went down to the people and told them. Okay, then chapter 20. Then God spoke all these words, saying, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Right? Once they're married here, they're being married. They can't have any other husbands. They can't commit adultery on God. That's why throughout the Old Covenant system, when Israelites go and worship false gods, he says, I see you in the cemeteries and up on the mountaintops, cheating on me, committing adultery with false gods. I see you. You're my wife. What are you doing? And that's why all the punishments in the Old Testament on the people of Israel. And that's why in the New Covenant, in Revelation 21, 22, it says that they will not be bringing idolatry into this new Jerusalem, into this new system, into this new tabernacle, if you will, or into this new covenant marriage. There will be no cheating. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness which is in heaven or on earth or below the earth. You shall not worship them, which is below the earth or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I am the Lord your God. I'm a jealous God. And he goes on and show loving kindness. And he goes on now and gives them the 10 Commandments. He gives them their wedding vows, if you will. And the people say, yeah, we're going to do it. Didn't Jesus do this? He says, you have heard it said, thou shalt not do this. But I say, he's giving them the new covenant law. He's the new Moses. Right? He's telling them how to live from the heart. Now, let's skip down to verse 18 of Exodus 20. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sounds of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and they stood at a distance. And they said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we'll listen, but don't let God speak to us or we'll die. This is old covenant, fear. But the New Testament says we've not yet received we've not received again a spirit of fear. This is something new. Okay? They said, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you will not sin. See, the old covenant system was a system of fear, of not breaking commands, to test them, to test the wife, to see if she remained faithful. That's the old covenant system that lasted for a time. But there would come a time, and this happened because of Adam and what happened in the garden. That's why it's this type of fear covenant. In the day that you eat, you shall surely die. Adam said, God said, where were you, Adam, after he had partaken of the forbidden fruit? Where were you, Adam? He says, I was afraid. so I hid myself from you. That's the kind of covenant that's continuing here. In the new covenant, it would not be like that. Behold, I make a new covenant with the house of Jacob, not like the one I made with their fathers. This is something else. Something that happens in the heart, Jeremiah says. Not just rote ritual and fear of God and the keeping of these 600 and however many Old Testament commandments. That would be taken away. This was a test. And I think in some sense it was a way to say to the world who's continuing to read this book thousands of years later that that kind of religion doesn't work. It doesn't draw you close to God. As the Israelites prove over and over, a system of rules and regulations and fear of death if you disobey and all this doesn't work. Doesn't make people love God. So Jesus came to bring about something new, where God would dwell with his people in a new way. Look at the Beatitudes. That's what Jesus is saying. The kingdom of heaven that's coming for you will be like this. Something inside of you. The new kingdom, he says, you don't look for it and say, here it is or there it is, but the kingdom will be within you. This was without them. Tabernacles and furniture and animal sacrifices and threat of capital punishment and so forth and so on, and earthquakes and lightning and thunder and fear of God's presence, and something else was coming. Something that wasn't this. Okay, let's pick up in verse 18. All the people perceived the thunder. This is Exodus 20. And lightning and flashes and the trumpet and all that. We see all this in the New Testament again, because it's a second Exodus, it's a second giving of law, it's a second covenant. And they said to Moses, speak to us yourself. Okay, verse 20. And Moses said to the people, don't be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin, transgress the covenant, commit adultery on him. So the people stood at a distance while Moses approached the thick cloud where God was, the Shekinah glory. 22. Then the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. Well, did he speak to them from heaven, or did he speak to them from the mountain? From the mountain, the cloud that was up in the mountain where they could see the cloud. That's heaven. Not some unearthed, some visible celestial place up in the universe or beyond the universe somewhere. No, he's calling that heaven. That was, okay, follow me here. The place of his presence at this point was the mountain, Sinai. He calls that heaven. Then he gives Moses directions to build a tabernacle, and he says, that's the new place of my presence. That's the new heaven. Then they built a temple eventually, and he moved into the temple, and that was the new heaven, where the Shekinah glory cloud dwelt. In the most holy place, the heavens. Acts chapter 1, Jesus was in the Shekinah glory cloud, went up to heaven in the cloud. And they watched him go up the Temple Mount into the temple area. Does that seem ludicrous after beginning to understand this? Not to me. It seems more ludicrous that he floated away into the sky. We looked recently in a video of mine called Jesus and Elijah, that many people thought that Elijah, many people still today do, would argue and say, yeah, Elijah was caught up to heaven, literally in a miraculous chariot of fire with horses of fire. He was whisked away into the heavens, into the sky, into the celestial realm. No, we showed that he was not, that it was something earthly that happened to him. Jesus was a parallel of Elijah as well, who passed the mantle to Elisha. Folks, it's all here. Now you want to say, okay, man, then what happened to Jesus after he went up to the temple, if that's what happened? Two things. One, I'm not saying that's definitely what happened. I'm saying it makes a whole lot of sense to me. I don't think they were literally caught up to heaven in 1 Thessalonians 4. I don't think they're caught up to heaven in 1 Corinthians 15 in a literal way. I don't think they walked into a new literal Jerusalem in Revelation 21. but it's one made without hands, the writer of Hebrews tells us. This is an invisible kingdom. Jesus said so. The place he went to prepare, the Father's house, is invisible, right? It's in you, he says. It's a new covenant. It's a new agreement. It's a new marriage. So I don't think those things were literal, and I'm fairly certain that Jesus didn't float away into the sky any more than Elijah did, or the saints did in 1 Thessalonians 4:17 in AD 70. So that's one thing. I'm not saying it's definite, but I'm saying I'm fairly certain of it. It makes a whole lot of sense to me. The second thing I'm saying is, what happened to him if he went up to the Temple Mount where the place of God's glory was in the Shekinah cloud? I don't know. It says that he was seated at the right hand of the Father after that, right? In heavenly places. But Paul also tells the church, while he's writing to them on earth, they're sitting there reading his letter or listening to it being read. He says, you're seated in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. No, they weren't. They were there listening on planet earth, in a synagogue somewhere, or in a house, or an assembly, in a gathering. And Paul says, no, you're seated in heavenly places. He's trying to figure it out, folks. Okay. Heavenly place, what did he mean when he said you're seated in heavenly places? He's saying you're now, as followers of Christ, under new leadership. You're now in the heavenly places. The heavenly places, you're in the presence of God, where Jesus is, because he rose from the dead as the new Adam. He died to the old. He was representative of the new, the first fruits into the new covenant system. Doesn't tell us anything. It says that he appeared to the Apostle Paul on the road to Emmaus. Stephen, when he's stoned to death, says, look, I see him at the right hand of the Father. That's a vision, like the book of Revelation. So I don't know exactly what happened to Jesus, but he was in some kind of body, and he went up to the temple, more than likely. And they watched him go, and they say, why are you standing here watching him go? He's going to come back in the same way. Well, how did he come back? He didn't come back and meet them on the Mount of Olives, although Zechariah's prophecy said when the Lord returned and Mount of Olives would be split in two, he came back in the war. He was present somehow in AD 70, from 66 to 70, in that destruction of the old system of the temple that he went up to in Acts 1. That old temple system of the Shekinah glory of God being there on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was destroyed. Jesus went up to that, and when he came back, he went there again and destroyed it. That makes a whole lot of sense to me, folks. All right, let's press on. Exodus chapter 20. Verse 21, so the people stood at a distance while Moses approached the thick cloud, and the Lord said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, you yourself have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. You shall not make other gods beside me, or silver, of gold, and all of that. And you shall make an altar made out of the land, made out of dirt, made out of earth for me, and you shall sacrifice on it your burnt offerings, and your peace offerings, and your sheep, and your oxen, and all of that. And if you make an altar of stone for me, you shall not build it of cut stones. For if you wield your tool on it, you will profane it. There's a lot in there too, symbolically. But that's not what we're touching on today. Nothing is said by accident. It's all typological of the ministry of Christ. Right? He was the stone that the builders rejected, not cut with human hands. So I can't get off into that. Now here's a mind-blowing verse. You ready? And verse 26 of Exodus 20. He tells them to make this sacrifice in this altar where they sacrifice, and you shall not go up to this altar by steps, so that your nakedness will not be exposed on it. Wow. Adam was found naked in the garden. Whatever that meant, God didn't like it. They were naked to begin with, but then they knew they were naked, and God says, who told you that you were naked? And that nakedness was something that was part of what got Adam kicked out of Eden. Then we flip over a few chapters, and behold, Noah, his son, sees him naked and exposes that nakedness to the brothers. Right? The son, was it Ham? The son Ham? And he gets a curse upon him and upon his people for exposing that nakedness. Now, turn over to, we looked at this the other day in my resurrection videos, but turn over to 2 Corinthians. Watch this. Here's a mind number. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Watch this. They're longing for a house to be clothed with. They're longing for the new Jerusalem. They're longing for the new tabernacle. We groan, this body of Israel, for a new house. Right? Moses is about to go up on the mountain and receive instructions for how to build the house of God, the tabernacle. They said, Paul is saying here, we as a body, Israelites, we're longing for the new house that's coming down out of heaven to be among us. Watch this. And once we put that on, we will not be found naked. For indeed, while we are in this tent, the body of Israel, the body of Moses, the body of Adam, that old tabernacle system, right? While we are in this tent, we long to be clothed with the immortal. All right, let me read it again. For indeed, while we're in this tent, we groan, being burdened. Under the old marriage contract, there's fear. They're burdened. The law has killed them. Because we do not want to be naked, but we want to be clothed, so that this mortal body of Israel, the body of Moses, will be swallowed up in immortality. Swallowed up by the new eternal life of the new kingdom that's coming. That's the eternal life they were going to receive. Life is relationship with God, covenant relationship. That's what life is. Eternal life is the new covenant that would last forever. This was temporary, and we're going to see that in a couple of minutes. Ready? Here we go. Let's press on. Let's flip over now to, because there he's given them the 10 commandments, and he tells them to build this altar, and he says, I don't want to see your nakedness, or you'll be punished. Now let's flip over to chapter 23. I'm sorry, let's go to chapter 24. Now let's go to 23. All right, now watch this. Verse 20 of chapter 23. Behold, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way. Now they're in the wilderness, the desert, and they're going to the promised land. And while they're going to the promised land, the Canaanites and other peoples are living there, and they have to kick those people out. And all manner of wars and battles take place in order to expel them or cast them out of the land so that Israel could have this as their promised land. That's the context. Watch this. So now they're married, and God is about to give them their inheritance, their land, for his bride. Ready? Behold, I'm going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way and to bring you into the place that I have prepared. Well, who brought them into the place that they prepared? Joshua. Joshua is the angel. I'm going to send you a messenger. That's the word. I'm going to send you an ambassador. Someone sent by me to do the work. I'm going to send you an angel. And that angel, watch, will bring you into the place I have prepared. Be on your guard before him and obey his voice, and do not be rebellious towards him. Were they rebellious against Joshua? Yup. For he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. Jesus' name was Yeshua. This is Yeshua. Jesus is Yeshua. Yeshua brought them into the old promised land. Yeshua would bring them into the new promised land. All paralleled. Watch this. But if you truly obey his voice, verse 22, and do all that I say, then I will, watch, I will be an enemy to your enemies. The Canaanites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Hivites, the Hittites, all these people that were living in the land that God was giving to them. Watch, I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. Watch this. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land. Joshua brought them into the land, not Moses. I'll bring you into the land of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. I will expel the foreigners who worship false gods. Now hold on to this. I will expel the foreigners who worship false gods out of the land, and I will give it to you. Watch this. You shall not worship their gods. They're heathens, pagans. That's why they're getting kicked out. Nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars in pieces. These were people that were not worshiping the one true God. I'm sure they had their chance, but they were not. You could trace all these peoples back to Adam in the garden. These were all descendants of Adam. but they became the foreigners. They became rebellious against God. Each of those tribes of people who became nations, they all stem back from Adam. Do the work, trace it back. So they're all related to Adam. These Israelites were related to Adam, and so were all those ites. That's vital to understand. God didn't hate those people. They hated him. Look at the Tower of Babel right away after the flood, right? And the destruction of the heavens and the earth at that time. They're already building a tower into the heavens, worshiping pagan gods. All these peoples were worshiping pagan gods. So God says, look, I'm going to select out a new people. I'm going to select out a peculiar people for myself among these peoples. And I'm going to try to show them that I'm the true God. Most of them didn't care. They didn't care in the beginning. They didn't care here. And they didn't care at the end. They worshiped the Baals and the Molechs and their Asherah poles. And they sacrificed their own children to these gods of the sun, Ra, and all of this. Even the Egyptians stem from those people in Adam. They all do. The Philistines. That's vital. God extended himself to them, and they didn't want him. So he says, now I'm going to kick them all out of the land. I'm going to give it to you. And I'm doing a test with you. I'm going to marry you and do a test and see if you're faithful. Was Israel faithful? Nope. They worshiped those foreign gods too. That's why God divorced the 10 northern tribes. Then he divorced Judah in the new covenant. Why? We have no king but Caesar, the Jews said. Caesar was worshipped as a god, a pagan god. So they were worshiping a pagan god. They gave to Caesar their taxes, right? Which was look, you see where I'm going with this? They were giving of the fruit of their labor that was supposed to go to God. They were giving that to Caesar. They took the mark of the beast, as the book of Revelation says. When Jesus is they're sending him away to be crucified, and they're standing before Pilate. Pilate says, you want me to crucify your king? They say, that's not our king. That Messiah is not our Messiah. That's not our king. We have no king but Caesar. This is the same thing that's happened all through the Bible, folks. That's why those people were destroyed, kicked out of the land, and a new land was given to a new people, right? Not a land in the Middle East, but the whole globe. Go out, Matthew chapter 22. Go out now after the destruction of the city and spread the message to anyone who will come. Anyone who will come. We already read here before that the beasts of the field were a part of these people as well, foreigners. Any one of these ites could have come in and said, hey, I want to worship your God. I believe he's the one true God. And they could become part of the Israelites. Okay, now watch this. I'm going to prove that in a minute here, even more so. Now he says, verse 25, but you shall serve the Lord your God, not worship other gods, and he will bless your bread and your water. And I will remove sickness from your midst if you obey me. What did Jesus come and do? He started healing people. Started healing people from their sicknesses and their diseases. Saying, God is back. He's doing something new. Ready? Watch this. I will send my terror. Oh boy, watch this. Oh wait, here we go. Verse 26. This is a mind blower. There shall be no one who miscarries or be barren in your land if you obey me. I will fulfill the number of your days. There was a temporary number of days given for this nation. And God said, if you obey me, I'll fulfill that number. He knew a new covenant was coming, God. He was testing Israel. We just read that. I'm giving you this. I'm marrying you. I'm giving you these marriage vows. I'm giving you these laws. And I'm testing you to see if you'll remain faithful to me. But they didn't. What did Daniel say as the end was approaching? 500 years before Jesus came, he says, okay, 490 years are given for your people to make an end of transgression, an end of sin. Look what it says here. If you don't sin against me, then I'll do all these things for you, and I'll fulfill the number of your days. Well, they sinned against him constantly. So Daniel says, okay, 490 days are left for your people to make an end of the law transgressions, to finish that whole system. Then we'll start something new. Watch this now, verse 27. This is it. I will send my terror ahead of you if you obey me, among the ites, among the foreigners that are around you. I'll make them afraid of you. And I will throw into confusion all the people around you. And I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you, meaning run away from you in battle. I'll give you victory over your enemies who are worshiping these false gods, slaughtering their own children and so forth, who reject me as their God. I will give you victory over them in war. Watch this. And I will send hornets ahead of you, so they will drive out the Hivites and the Canaanites and the Hittites before you. Literal hornets? No. He's saying, I will send out other armies that will get rid of these people for you, so you won't even have to do the heavy work. And we see that happening as we read on in the story. Right here, they're called hornets. What are they called in the book of Revelation? The Roman armies that come in and destroy those who were seeking to destroy the church of Christ. God also drove out their enemies in the New Testament time. He came and destroyed the apostate Jews who were persecuting the church of Christ. He brought hornets. He brought locusts, scorpions, he calls the Roman army. Same stuff. These are peoples. Now watch this. I will drive them out before you. Watch this. They're the hornets. In Revelation, they're scorpions, serpents, creeping things along the ground from Genesis. Those are people. Beasts of the field, birds of the air, creeping things along the ground. Those are people. God brought them to Adam so Adam could name them. These are people. Jesus said the birds of the air come and snatch the seeds away. Who came and snatched the seeds of the gospel away? The Judaizers, the apostate Jews, tried to stop the gospel from going forth and caused many to apostatize and come back into Judaism. They snatched the seed away. Jesus called them the birds of the air. Why birds of the air? Because they're the rulers in the air in the heavenly places. They ruled in the temple system. Birds of the air. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17, they meet the Lord in the air. Not the literal air. They didn't float up into the sky. They met God in the new place of his rule and authority, because the old authorities had gone and God was no longer part of that system. He was part of the new Jerusalem system, and that's why they met him in the air like they went up here and met him in the mountain. Here comes now. This is mind-blowing. You say, Frank, this is ridiculous. Beasts of the field are people? Who did Noah bring on the ark then when he brought the beasts of the field, creeping things along the ground, birds of the air? Yeah, who did he bring along in the ark? He brought people. That's why it had to be so big. Am I nuts? Watch. He'll send out hornets ahead of you. Did he send out literal hornets? Did God literally say, I'm going to drive out the Hittites and the Hivites and the Canaanites by sending a swarm of hornets? And they're all going to run and leave the land. Of course not. Watch this. And I will drive them out before you in a single year, so that the land will not become desolate. In other words, you're going to get in there quick. The land's not going to have time to become desolate. I'm going to drive them out, and you'll go in and take all the good stuff that they prepared there in that land. It'll all be yours. Right? We're not going to wait too long. We're going to do it fast, and everything that was theirs in the land will now be yours. Right? Now watch this. Here, hold on. I hope you're sitting down. I will drive them out before you in a single year, so that the land may not become desolate, and the beasts of the field not become too numerous for you. What's he talking about here? He's talking about the people, the enemies, the Hivites, the Canaanites. Hornets are going to come and drive out the beasts of the field. Wow. I will drive them out before you. Now he just says he's going to drive out the beasts of the field. And watch this. I will drive them out before you little by little until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. In the garden, the trees bore fruit. Trees are people too. People groups. Adam partook of a tree. He had some kind of fellowship. He ate. He covenanted with a tree that he wasn't supposed to. He began worshiping idols. That's what I believe happened with Adam. So he got kicked out of the promised land, because that's what happens all through here. They worship false gods. The serpent came. Somebody was worshiping false idols, and he convinced Adam and Eve to eat from that tree too, to worship false gods. And they were out. Watch this. He drives these people out of the land so Israel can have it. Why? Because they worshiped false gods. He later drives Israel out of their land. Why? Because they worship false gods. I wrote a book called Cast Them Out. Who are the biblical demons? Jesus came and started driving people out of the land when he was here too. Who were they? I'll put the link to my book down below. Demons, not who you think they are, maybe who you think they are. Not who I thought they were for a long, long time either. Watch this now. I will drive them out before you little by little. You become fruitful and take possession of the land. I'll fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines. On and on. Watch this. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and I will drive them out before you. Jesus was driving some people out in Israel too, who were occupying their land, who were worshiping false gods. And he drove them out of the land as a sign to say something new is coming, where you'll no longer be possessed by these demons, but you're going to get a new land where these demons don't live. Oh man, come on. This is phenomenal. They shall not live in your land, and they will not, and because they will make you sin against me if they do. Who was making, in the first century, in the time of Jesus, who was making the Israelites sin against God in some way? Who was possessing them? What false gods were possessing them? What heathen peoples were possessing them, making them worship false gods? Read my book on the demons. You can get it on Amazon. Again, I said I'll put the link below. Okay, now, here we go. Then he came to Moses, chapter 24. Watch this. Then God said to Moses, come up to the Lord, go back up to the mountain, you and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall worship at a distance. Now more can come up. Moses alone, however, watch this, Moses alone, however, should be allowed to come very near to the Lord, but they shall not come near, nor shall the people come up with him. Still couldn't come up. The time of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 had not arrived. This was a temporary people. When their days were up, then the people could come up to the Shekinah glory. Then Moses came and recounted, even in Acts chapter 1, Jesus goes up to, to the house of God, to the Shekinah glory, to the Temple Mount, but the others don't go. They watch him go. These people watch Moses go, but they can't go, because Jesus went up to the temple with the Shekinah glory. Read Zechariah. See what's going on there. With the Temple Mount and the Mount of Olives. Watch this. Then Moses came and recounted to the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice, everything that the Lord says we will do. So Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord that God gave him in the mountain. Then he arose early in the morning, built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent the young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrifices of young bulls. Moses took half of the blood and put it in the basins. The other half he sprinkled on the people. They had to be sprinkled with the blood of Christ in the New Testament. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. That was their book of life. It was the book of the covenant. It was their marriage contract. Do a study on that, and then the book of life in Revelation. Verse 8, so Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. So there's a book, and those sprinkled with blood received the book, and that was giving them life as they were sprinkled with the blood of the animals. This is a book of life of sorts. Watch this. Then Moses went up the mountain with Aaron, his brother, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. And they saw the God of Israel. And under his feet there appeared to be a pavement or a street of sapphire as clear as the heavens. So they see a picture of God in this vision or whatever they're seeing there. And they see that God's feet are resting on the heavens. His feet are on it. Underneath it are the people down below, and this is the place of the heavens where they meet God in his presence. Did you catch that? Look at this. And under God's feet there appeared a pavement or a street or a road of sapphire as clear as the heaven itself. So this is the heavenly place. Moses right now was seated with God in heavenly places, like Jesus would be seated with God in heavenly places. The place of God's rule, the place of his glory, the place where he gives his law, the place where he looks down upon the people and rules over them. Watch this. Yet God did not stretch out his hand against the nobles or the sons of Israel. That's the 70 elders. God didn't kill them. And they saw God and they ate and they drank. Covenant. They ate and they drank bread and wine. There's so much I could say about that, but we're already gone over an hour. I'm coming into the close here. Now the Lord said to Moses, come up. Come up. Here it is again. How many times do we read? Come up to me on the mountain and stay there. And I will give you stone tablets of law. And I will give you the stone tablets with the law and the commandments which I have written for their instruction. So Moses arose with Joshua, his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. But to the elders he said, wait here until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a legal matter, let him approach them. This is mind-blowing. So Jesus returns to the right hand of the Father, somehow, some way, right? And he's receiving the Father's house, right? He's receiving the new law, the new kingdom that was to come. Jesus said, when you pray, pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. So Moses goes up here for 40 days. Jesus went away for 40 years. What was he doing? I go to prepare a place for you, a new tabernacle. Hold on, because it's coming. And then he says, wait here to the others. And if anybody has any questions or answers, go to these elders and these people. So Jesus goes to the Father and he says, same thing. If you've got any questions, go to the apostles. During that 40-year transition period, they're the leaders seated in heavenly places with you. They're your authorities. He gave some to be pastors, some to be prophets, some to be teachers. Then Moses went up to the mountain, verse 15. Watch this. And a cloud covered the mountain, the Shekinah glory. And the glory of the Lord rested on the mountain. And the cloud covered it for 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moses from out of the midst of the cloud. And to the eyes of the sons of Israel in the appearance of the glory of the Lord, they saw it way up there. Was like a mountain, was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop. Here we go. And Moses entered the midst of the cloud. He went into the Shekinah glory. Jesus seated at the right hand of the Father. And he went up to the mountain, and Moses was on the 40 nights. So Moses goes up to the midst of the cloud. He went up to the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus was gone for 40 years until his return to bring the new tabernacle. Revelation 21:22. Among the people of God. Watch, hold on. Then the Lord spoke to Moses during those 40 days. Tell the sons of Israel to raise a contribution among them. From every man whose heart moves him, he shall raise a contribution. Watch this. And verse 8, let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them. After the 40 years, after the 40 days, Moses comes down from the mountain and he gives them instructions on how to build the new tabernacle so God could live among them. What happened after 40 years when Moses returned in 70 AD? What do we read happened? After Jesus came down from the mountain after 40 years. Watch this. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there's no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride, as a new wedding, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. And he will wipe away the tears from their eyes, because they were being persecuted and murdered by the apostate Judaism, which had just been destroyed. And now he would wipe away those tears. That suffering was over. Paul talks about that suffering over and over again that they were going through. Read 1 Thessalonians, read 2 Thessalonians, read all the epistles and see the suffering everywhere. And now that was over, and they were married to God in a new way. And the beasts of the field could come into that just like they came into the old, and we see them coming in. That's why Peter's vision in Acts chapter 10 is of the blanket coming down, and he sees what? The birds of the air, the creeping things of the ground, the beasts of the field, and the visions. God says, kill and eat. Fellowship with foreigners and let them into the kingdom, this new kingdom. Let them into the new kingdom too. Verse 8, let them construct a sanctuary for me that I may dwell among them, according to all I'm going to show you as the pattern of this tabernacle and the pattern of all its furniture, just so you shall construct it the way that I tell you. Folks, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Well, you know what? Let's read it before we get out of here. I hope now that you'll see that in light of that, and that this is a parallel to that. It's entrance into the new tabernacle, to the new mountain, if you will, to the Shekinah glory, to the presence of God up in the air, up in the heavens. That's what this is, just like 1 Corinthians 15, just like Paul talking about the resurrection in Romans. Verse 16, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout. God descends from heaven and comes onto the mountain, the place of his presence in the old covenant. It says God came down to the mountain and Moses went up to the mountain. It says to meet God in that mountain, not in some unseen, invisible place. The people down below could see it going on, but they couldn't come up. Now they could in the new covenant. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout and the voice of the archangel. I think this is God, is the Lord. The archangel is Jesus. And with the trumpet of God. And the dead, here, so we see the trumpet, right? We see the voice. These are all in Exodus. And the dead in Christ will rise first. I think those who are, all these Israelites, all of them, from Adam forward who died, were waiting somewhere in Sheol to be taken up to the mountain. Right? To be taken. They had to wait for the time of the new covenant before they could be released from their holding place. They were shut up under law, just like the living were shut up under law. Watch this. Then we who were, the dead would be caught up into the new kingdom too. They to an invisible place. Wherever that is, whatever that is. Watch this. Then we who are alive and remain still here on the planet will also be caught up, brought up to that mountain, together with them. Watch this. To meet the Lord in the heavens. This is that. It's the new marriage. It's the new law. It's the new covenant. It's the new Shekinah glory. It's the new dwelling place of God on earth in the new tabernacle. They went up to that mountain, symbolically speaking. That's Hebrews chapters 11 and 12. We'll be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the heavens. And we will always be with the Lord. They weren't allowed to be with the Lord under the old covenant system. It was the ministry of condemnation and death. They couldn't even touch the mountain. It brought death. Neither Israelite nor foreigner could touch the mountain. Foreigners who joined themselves to Israel, they couldn't touch the mountain. Here, they're allowed to go up. Only Moses could go into the Shekinah glory. Jesus then went into the Shekinah glory. Acts chapter 1. Now they could all go into the Shekinah glory. I've given you the big picture here. Now as you read through the Bible again, these dots will start coming together and you can do your own work. But I'm convinced, even if I can't get every nuance and detail down as this word connects to that word and this, I'm sure you can see the gist here that this is that. So what makes more sense here? That they were literally whisked off the planet when Elijah was not? When Moses was not? Jesus, Acts chapter 1, what do you think happened there? You look for yourselves. What do you think happened here in 1 Thessalonians 4? Were they literally seated with him in heavenly places when Paul said they were? Nope. Figurative, symbolic, metaphor. Were they literally caught up into the air? Nope. They entered into the new covenant. This is the marriage. God gave the first marriage contract from the mountain out of his Shekinah glory cloud with trumpets and angels, right? Moses was an angel. Joshua was an angel. Messenger. The second coming has all of those same elements. And the Lord on the mountain in 1 Thessalonians 4 with Jesus, Moses. So you see the Father in Moses, but you see the Father in Jesus. And in Exodus, watch this. Moses, here's the Father. Moses goes into the cloud with him. And together they bring those instructions for the new tabernacle to the people. 1 Thessalonians 4, the Father. Second Moses, Jesus. And together they bring the new tabernacle and the new law and the new marriage covenant down to the people. Revelation 21 and 22. John chapter 14. Where I'm going now, you can't come. Moses, I'm going up to God's presence in the mountain. You can't come. I'm going to the Shekinah glory. You can't come. But you will be able to come later after 40 years. Let me go up on the mountain and prepare the place for you. Let me get the blueprints for the tabernacle. Then I'll come down and you'll meet us in the new mountain. And you'll be with us, me and the Father. My Father's house, there are many dwelling places. If it weren't so, I wouldn't tell you. So now I go to prepare a place for you. You can't come now, but when I return, you'll come to be where I am also. Thanks, guys, for taking the time today. I hope this meant something to you. I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, wait, one more thing before we get out of here. I made this little graphic and I wanted to do a little something to show today. I wanted to show you a little something today with this graphic. I hope it comes out the right way in the video. It's not backwards. There are a lot of people who make fun of the fact that the resurrection and the rapture, one and the same thing. It's coming to new life in the new marriage, in the new covenant system. A lot of people make fun of the position that I hold and many others hold, that it wasn't a literal physical bodily resurrection of dead people out of the grave, receiving some type of new body with fingers and eyes and nose and then going up into heaven with that new body. Or did they float? Neither did they float away into the sky. This little graphic is very simple, but here are the Israelites. Foreigners could always join themselves to Israel. So I'm going to always say that and include them in here. People who were not Israelites, they were also descended from Adam. And I believe God reached out to them too. We see it all through the Old Testament. Isaiah 57, read it. It says that Isaiah 57, God is inviting foreigners, non-Israelites, to worship with the Israelites, to worship him. And he calls them the beasts of the field. Again, he says, so all you beasts of the field, come and eat. Come fellowship with me. Join yourself to Israel. And I'll make a memorial for you in my house. That's even greater than the memorial for some of my own sons and daughters, even some of the Israelites. Read Isaiah 56. I'm sorry, not 57. Isaiah 56. Read it. So here are the Israelites. Okay? And this is under the Old Covenant system. Here's God's presence in the Shekinah glory. But the law, the ministry of guilt, death, condemnation, nakedness is keeping them from the Shekinah presence. They can't go up to the mountain. They can't meet God in the air, in the place of his presence. God's heaven, the heavenly places. But Christians were seated in the heavenly places in the transition period, awaiting the fullness, awaiting the resurrection. This is God's mountains, right? That's where his presence was in the Shekinah glory. But this is blocking them. They're naked. They're dead. They're condemned because they can't keep the law. They don't even want to keep the law most of the time. They said, oh, everything you say we'll do. No, they cheated on God over and over and over and over again. And they were dead in their trespasses and sins. And all these represent all of their law codes and all of their violations against God, right? They were dead, but a resurrection was coming. The Bible is not concerned with their physical bodies dying and then they're going to pop up out of the ground, get some new Superman body and fly up into heaven. That's not what the Bible is dealing with when it's talking about resurrection. What it's dealing with is that at the time of AD 70, at the time when Christ put all enemies under his feet, at the time of the new marriage, at the time of the new covenant, this would all be removed. And now there would be direct access into the presence of God. That's the resurrection. That's the new life. That's the new birth into a new kingdom. Direct access now in the new Jerusalem, in the new tabernacle of God, without all this around it anymore. But now it's faith, and it's grace, and it's love, and it's the Beatitudes. And it's heart. The kingdom of God is within you. And all the beasts of the field can come and eat. Read 1 Corinthians 15 again about the different kinds of bodies, right? What kind of body will we have in the resurrection, they ask Paul. He says, there's a lot of different kinds of bodies. He says, you've got bodies of the sun, moon, and the stars. That's the Israelites. You've got bodies of the beasts of the field, birds of the air, creeping things along the ground. That's the body of the non-Israelites, right? What else does he say? Let's look at it. I looked at it in my resurrection video, but let's look at it again. 4 resurrection videos. Check those out, please. They're going to take you time to read through them, but I think it'll be worth it. 1 Corinthians 15. Now we see it in a whole new way, don't we? He says, that which you sow into the ground isn't what you get. The old body dies, you get something new. Old Israel, old covenant Israel died, AD 70. New covenant Israel born. Call him Israel if you want. And if you want to say, today, then you're a wannabe Israelite. Call it whatever you want. The fact is, God made a new covenant 2,000 years ago with the people that he was primarily dealing with on the planet at that time. I don't know what he was doing around the rest of the globe. Neither do you. But what we do know is what we have here. And the book of Revelation tells us that in the new tabernacle, which comes down among men, those gates are flung wide open. And the kings of the earth, the kings of the land bring their worship into it. They worship God. They come, they bring praise into it. That's all throughout the Old Testament. God is inviting foreigners to come in. It's nothing new. Watch this. He says, that which is planted, that which you sow one body and then it dies and something else comes out, right? But God gives to the body just as he wishes. Then he says, all flesh is not the same. All these bodies are not the same. You got the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, fish. We know that all of these are people throughout the Old Covenant. Then you've got the sun, the moon, and the stars. You've got the glory of one type of people group. You've got the glory of another type of people group. See? He says one is sown perishable and one is raised imperishable. One was a temporary kingdom. We just saw, God said in Exodus, I'm going to fulfill your days. And one is an imperishable kingdom, an imperishable body. That's the resurrection, a new community of saints that goes on and on and on and on. It never ends. It's eternal life.